most trauma survivors will never receive trauma-focused care, even though effective treatments do exist.
A lot of people do know they need help, and most of the survivors are actively trying to find the right supports. Often on that search for the right care, that people start to get really discouraged. So the reality is the vast majority of mental health providers are not trained in evidence-based trauma assessment and treatment. And so the odds of connecting with somebody who has that training are just really low. What ends up happening is people, in the worst cases, re-traumatized on that journey, being asked to relay in an unsupportive environment traumatic details too early, too in-depth. What you see is people end up internalizing that as, there must be something wrong with me because I've been in therapy for years now and I'm not getting better. People, they're really hesitant to trust and to put themselves out there and desperate for connection and understanding. So we've really made an effort to sort of translate the science in really accessible language, offer a lot of opportunity to apply it to yourself. One of the coolest things I've heard from some of our members is this concept of going through the self-guided content and some of the storytelling that gave me the words to put to my own experiences. And I did not have those words before. And now that I have these words and a little bit of a framework to think about it, now I feel ready to talk to a therapist about it.
If someone's saying, okay, I'm ready to go to therapy, but then they hear this word called prolonged exposure therapy.
This is something we talk about a lot. Confront the thing that you've been actively and intentionally avoiding because it brings you pain, traumatic memories, what it actually is. It's working with a trained professional who really understands trauma and trauma recovery to systematically and carefully reprocess or tell the story of your traumatic experiences so that you can release the emotion that's been built up so that your brain can learn, I'm safe now. The trauma is no longer happening to me.
Question from our audience. Someone tried different therapists, different apps, and they still didn't find anyone to help them or they can connect to.
Our goal and our mission is if somebody comes to Rebound, they will not have that experience because we are training our providers, everyone who has contact with a survivor. It is our mission. They will have an experience that is what it should be like when people are seeking help. No treatment is 100% effective. 83% of people who go through PE will get full remission from their trauma symptoms. But I think it's important for us to be very collaborative, and if people aren't improving, to be really thoughtful about how we can best support. There is no one path or one pace to your healing. We're all unique, and give yourself some grace with the pace that you're at today if you're struggling in your healing.
All right, we're back with another episode. We have a very special guest. I'm Tyquon Jordan, co-host of Dash Wellness, and I have my other co-host, Carolyn Palmer Wallace, with me. Before we dive in, I have to ask you a few questions. So, a lot of people wrestle with quietly trauma. If time is supposed to heal trauma, why do so many people feel stuck years later? Why do memories fade, but anxiety, numbness, reactivity stays? Why do people move on with life on the outside, but feel like they're in survival mode on the inside? For a lot of trauma survivors, it's not that they're not trying to heal, it's that they were never taught or given the right tools, the right explanations, or the real access to care. And the hardest part, most people don't even realize what they're experiencing is trauma. They think something's wrong with them.
That's right. And today's conversation is about changing that. We're talking about why trauma often doesn't heal on its own, what evidence-based recovery actually looks like in real life, and how healing can begin even before or alongside therapy. And that's exactly why we're excited to welcome today's guest. Dr. Erin Berenz is a clinical psychologist, trauma expert, and the co founder and chief product officer of Rebound, which is a platform designed to make evidence based trauma recovery more accessible and understandable. Rebound began as a self help app providing psychoeducation and research backed tools for trauma recovery, and has recently expanded into rebound therapy, offering evidence based trauma treatment covered by many insurance plans.
Dr. Berenz, before we get into the tools and the research, we always like to start about your story. What led you into trauma work and eventually push you from academia into co-founding Rebound?
Oh man, yeah. I went to graduate school initially to study anxiety and substance use comorbidity. And I was in Burlington, Vermont. And it just so happened that there were some very recent waves of resettled refugees and asylum seekers in the area around the time I was in graduate school. And my clinical supervisor, it's a small community, so people were reaching out to the university, psychology clinic for guidance. And my clinical supervisor at the time said, we really need to pull together and figure out ways to support these communities who have been through horrific levels of trauma. And so it was through sort of partnering with my supervisors and peers in that program and partnering with leaders in the community that I started to develop an interest in, why does trauma stick with us? How do we help people recover the right way? And I just never really went back to my original work from there. So I kind of went on that path of studying trauma and PTSD. I did a lot of human laboratory work, a lot of treatment outcome studies, a lot of trying to implement treatments in the community, was on sort of the traditional academic path to do that. Landed most recently at the University of Illinois, Chicago, where I was a tenured associate professor leading a lab studying the mechanisms and treatment approaches for trauma. And at some point was like, we know actually a lot about how to help people get better. I can keep making these small refinements or keep studying how to do this, or I can hop out and figure out how to make a bigger impact. The issue hasn't been for a long time that we don't know how to help people heal, but it's just getting the information and the access out there. So I connected with my co-founder, Reva Kumar, who is a survivor of trauma and PTSD. She had to speak with 22 different providers to find somebody trained to treat her, and she was able to recover. And just sort of, we connected really around our passion for this access issue, and started with the self-guided app as a way to start getting information and support and tools out there.
That's amazing and quite the journey. It's always funny where we start in our career path and where we end up.
It's
So
so true. It's like wherever, and I kind of feel like where I feel like I am now, like we'll see how this grows from here as well. You just never know.
exactly, definitely. Well, I want to start off with an eye-opening and unfortunate reality about trauma. So while trauma is incredibly common, most trauma survivors, a lot of them never receive trauma focused care, even though effective treatments do exist. From your experience, why are so many trauma survivors overlooked or unable to access care? Is it because of costs, wait lists, stigma? Maybe some people don't recognize they are facing trauma at all. So, just if you can expand on that a bit.
Yeah, that's a big question. I think there are a lot of layers going on. I think, with respect to recognizing, people recognizing they need help, I think a lot of people do know they need help. And most of the survivors I've connected with are constantly actively trying to find the right supports. I think my co-founder's story is actually like pretty representative of what a lot of people go through. And I actually think it's often like on that search for the right care that people start to get really discouraged. The reality is the vast majority of mental health providers are not trained in evidence-based trauma assessment and treatment. And so the odds of connecting with somebody early or ever in your search who has that training are just really low. It's just a numbers game. And then, the experience of connecting with a number of people who do not have that training, who may not know how to approach assessment in a trauma-informed manner, or who may not know ways in which, engaging with you will help you get better or not help you get better. What ends up happening is people often get sort of, you know, in the worst cases, re-traumatized on that journey, being asked to relay in an unsupportive environment, sort of like, and this is no like not intentionally done by clinicians, of course, but being asked to relay traumatic details too early, too in depth. Um, and more commonly than that, what you see is people end up in what I think of as supportive counseling, which is they find themselves talking about like how did your week go? Like what's come up for you now? Let's just focus on the minutia of day-to-day life, and never really dig into the past. And so the way people end up internalizing that is, there must be something wrong with me because I've been in therapy for years now and I'm not getting better. There must be something wrong or different or complex or just broken about me as opposed to the system. And so, yeah, it's really unfortunate that's just the story I hear from people time and time again. Is that the access issue really becomes like, kind of like worsens the problem for a lot of folks.
A lot of people, like in the introduction, I said that they may not even know it's trauma. So, working with different trauma survivors or people that are still going through it, how does it normally show up in everyday life?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people, when they think of trauma, they think of veterans. But the reality is, your average civilian woman is more likely to have current PTSD than your average veteran. And so I think that one of the things that's really important, not directly answering your question education wise, is helping people understand like what are all of the different types of trauma and the ways that we're most at risk. Sexual and physical assault, which are more often experienced by women, is the most likely to result in lasting trauma symptoms. Um, but the way people typically I think most people do actually realize that they have a problem that's related to, or a set of problems related to past experiences, whether they call those experiences traumatic or not. So oftentimes what this looks like is sort of reliving the traumatic events in your mind, unwillingly. So having memories pop into your mind when you don't want them to, sort of being reminded and caught off guard by traumatic experiences in the day to day. There's a lot of emotional numbing that can happen. And then on the flip side, other times, like really intense emotions, including anger and sadness and anxiety. And then there's just a lot of fear that comes with unprocessed trauma as well. So people don't feel safe in their daily environment, even if they are objectively safe, their brains and their bodies don't feel safe, and that leads to a lot of avoidance of different aspects of the environment that might trigger unwanted memories or uncomfortable like physiological arousal or some of those states. And so if you have to think about avoiding certain places or people or things out of a fear of getting triggered or activated, your world just can get really, really small. You can get more and more isolated. And I think, other ways that people really, sort of notice that there's a problem related to these past experiences is a lot of like difficulty with like relationships, like not being able to trust other people, not being able to trust that people will treat them well, difficulties setting boundaries. I mean, it can look a lot of different ways and is a little bit unique person to person, but those are some of the most common ones that I've seen.
Yeah, definitely. I think we were curious about how trauma could manifest and kind of understand how individuals can recognize those signs to say, hey, you know what, maybe a trauma-informed support is something that is needed. So I think you mentioned that those are more commonly what people experience. And for people who do experience that, is there kind of like a first step that you would recommend, whether that's like a personal action or if it is just reaching out to a provider immediately?
Yeah, I think that I would love to say just reach out to a provider, but I think, I think it's ideal that people understand like maybe the types of providers or the types of support to look for. So we know that there are two types of therapies that are best supported for helping people sort of work through traumatic experiences. So there's prolonged exposure therapy, which is what we offer at Rebound, which is essentially helping people get their brain and body out of survival mode by engaging in sort of storytelling activities to step by step in a very structured and guided manner. Um, work towards reprocessing traumatic memories that they've been experiencing. So this helps the brain and body learn that these things are in the past. They're not happening right now. And just helps to emotionally process some of the difficult pieces of those memories that people have been holding on to. And then it also helps you to take small steps day to day to work through the areas of life that are being avoided because of the trauma. So just practicing going into those situations. And again, your brain and body get that opportunity to learn, okay, the trauma is over. I can actually go into these situations and be safe. The other therapy that is a gold standard is cognitive processing therapy, and that involves, sort of looking at the ways that our outlook on life has changed since the trauma or because of the trauma. So, beliefs around the ability to trust other people, around your own self-worth, around, like causal attributions about like why did the trauma happen and having an opportunity to challenge those and come up with sort of more helpful and more accurate maybe ways of seeing those situations. So ideally, if you're able, if people are calling around and they're looking for a therapist, or they're looking around on websites, looking for one of those therapies. I think to your question, if people aren't ready, if they're not at that point of sort of jumping right into therapy, which would be incredibly understandable, I think that, what a lot of people have found helpful is like identifying different communities online, on social media, different groups of survivors who have been through similar experiences and can really come together and talk about the challenges that they're having. So at Rebound, a lot of our members initially begin sort of in the social media communities that we've created around Rebound. And so it's been a really incredible way for people to realize, like, okay, I'm not the only one who's been through this. If other people are having similar reactions to trauma that I'm having, or, if this person is naming this type of thing that I've been through as trauma, and, maybe that'll help me recognize what I've been through really is trauma. It does count. That can be a really helpful first step just towards sort of like normalizing those reactions and recognizing like, okay, this isn't something that's just like wrong with me or that's like really weird that I'm experiencing. Other people are going through this too. And so I think for people who aren't quite ready to jump into professional help, like finding those like supportive types of communities where they can sort of have that opportunity, even if they're just like lurking, so to speak, just to be able to like be a part of people having these conversations, I think can be really powerful.
And you touched on our next point, which is how healing can begin before or alongside therapy. And I think that community aspect is very important. Um, just curious, so on Rebound, you said there's communities that they can go to in their area, or do you like find the communities for them so they can have those resources?
So the members we interact with, we're all in online spaces, and so we've got communities on TikTok, on Threads. Those are our largest communities through Rebound specifically. Um, I think sometimes like getting together in person, I think that can be a really nice thing. I think that sometimes feels like a bigger step for people too. So depending, and a lot of people don't live in areas that have that type of support group or connection opportunity available in person. So I think that really is the beauty of the uh, sort of the technology driven world that we're in currently. It's one, we could talk all day about the challenges of that, but I think one of the advantages is the access thing, being able to access some groups that, somebody in a small town or maybe like, um, a lot of people just don't even know where to start. It's a little bit easier to connect online. I think it can be really helpful.
Yeah.
Definitely. And in a world that's so technology dependent, I think that, some people may be skeptical of tools outside of traditional therapy, including, app-based therapy and communities of practice and stuff like that. What would you say to someone who is wondering how an app and these guided tools could meaningfully impact them and support trauma recovery?
Yeah. Well, I could talk to you a little bit about how we've approached it and like everything we've done. The Rebound app has been around for a few years now, and we're now sort of prepping to expand it to accommodate rebound therapy more comprehensively. But we've sort of built the Rebound app, with input from survivors every step of the way, and so we've had an opportunity to like let it be shaped by people's feedback and concerns and hesitations, which has been, I think, really important to our success. And so I think most people sort of have this like dichotomy in their experience where they're really hesitant to trust and to put themselves out there, and they're desperate for connection and understanding at the same time. And so I've been really amazed by it, like how many survivors really have been willing to take a chance, like on something like our app, for example. And so I can tell you a little bit about the way that we've like crafted that journey that I kind of think is like helpful for sort of bridging this gap from like that first step to like maybe I'll get in therapy one day. Is that we really start with a series of like lessons that are kind of a mix of like little bite-sized bits of like trauma education that's rooted in the science but framed in survivor language. And so I think that's what a lot of resources struggle with is sort of like really heavy-handed academic clinical language that doesn't necessarily map on to how I, like Erin, the survivor, might really understand and think about my experiences. So we've really made an effort to, sort of translate the science in really accessible language, offer a lot of opportunity to apply it to yourself. So, like, engage in self-reflective interactions, even practice some little storytelling exercises as people are ready around either how trauma is affecting them today, how do they experience being in survival mode, up till if people are ready, they can start even sort of toying with the concept of like putting words to their traumatic experiences. So we see kind of a range of what people need in the context of our offerings. So some people, they'll go through all of the self-guided content, get really deep with their storytelling and think like, okay, I'm good. Like I've, got a handle on this. That was enough for me. I would say more often than not, what people find is that they reach a point in their self-guided journey where they realize, okay, like now I'm ready for therapy. One of the coolest things I've heard from some of our members is this concept of like going through the self-guided content and some of the storytelling. It gave me the words to put to my own experiences. And like I did not have those words before. And now that I have these words and a little bit of a framework to think about it, like now I feel ready to talk to a therapist about it. And so sometimes that might be a therapist that they're already connected with, and other times they might be seeking out someone new for the first time. But that's how I kind of think about like this readiness journey is like, you might engage in certain aspects of that or stick with it for a certain amount of time until you get what you need. And maybe you decide therapy is what you need, maybe it's not, but like giving an opportunity to like figure that out for yourself, I think is really important. So just giving that like sort of safe space to do that, like even just like decision making around what do I need and what will my next steps be, I think is really powerful.
I agree. I know some folks who have experienced traumatic events in their life, and it's it's always the advice to, go to therapy. But what I have heard in my own experience is, well, I don't even know where to start. And so forming that picture and that framework and putting some words to the experience, I can definitely see that as being a very impactful first step for someone who just doesn't know how to even begin to approach that situation.
I think so. I absolutely think so. And I think to your point too, or maybe, I mean, you weren't making this point directly, but I think to maybe expand on what you were saying is that, um, not everyone needs therapy to get better. And in fact, the people who go through traumatic experiences and don't end up with lasting symptoms, one of the biggest predictors of that is having really good social support right in the aftermath of traumatic experiences. And so, I'm always struck by like if we were able to sort of better sort of serve that function of support for each other and really like kind of make it easier to connect with one another about things that we've been through, like probably a lot fewer people would need therapy. So, I also don't like love the idea that therapy is like the only path to healing. Like, therapists are people at the end of the day, but there's a lot that we can do for one another, either before or in place of therapy in some instances to provide some real opportunity for healing.
And if someone's thinking about going to therapy, they say, okay, I'm ready to go to therapy. But then they hear this word called prolonged exposure therapy, which has been one of the most effective approaches for treating trauma survivors or people who've been through trauma. Can we break that down? Because it can sound overwhelming or scary for first-time people who are trying to get into therapy.
Yeah, this is something we talk about a lot, and I think what you're flagging is that exact phenomenon of this like disconnect between the scientific language and then how people think about things. So whenever I've been in front of a client or a potential client and I'm talking about this is what prolonged exposure is, the overwhelming reaction is like, oh man, I know that's something I need to do, but like I really don't want to because like it's hard. Like it is hard, right? To like confront the thing that you've been actively and intentionally avoiding because it brings you pain, which is those traumatic memories. But I think that the way we think about it again is really, if we break down what it actually is, it's working with a trained professional who really understands trauma and trauma recovery to like systematically and carefully in a safe environment start to reprocess or sort of speak out loud or tell the story of your traumatic experiences so that you can sort of release the emotion that's been built up that your brain and body have been holding on to so that your brain can learn I'm safe now. The trauma is no longer happening to me. You can sort of like make some meaning from your experiences. And I don't mean find a silver lining to your trauma, but like, sort of in the process of telling your story, one of the natural effects, and this is really like tapping into the natural way that our body heals from trauma in the absence of therapy, really have an opportunity to make some meaning around what's happened to you, to put it into the larger story of your life. Because it is just, one or more chapters of your life. It's not the whole story. I think when you break down what it actually is, it's not that crazy. And I think a lot of people can really relate to this idea of putting things to words in the support of like an empathic and caring person and experience relief and healing from that, whether in a traumatic context or not. I think that concept of releasing what you're holding on to with a safe person who has empathy and understanding for you um, can really do wonders.
Definitely. And with Rebound therapy and the app now being bolstered and really relying on evidence-based treatment,
Mhm.
talk to us a little bit about how you're using that technology responsibly. Like, is more specifically, I guess, with the app, especially with today, there are, it seems like, a million apps for similar things. And so, if you could talk to us about how you are using that technology and not eliminating the human connection. You spoke to us a little bit about establishing community, but if you can go more in depth with that.
Absolutely. So all of our community with Rebound is currently sort of organic on these social media channels. We don't have a formal community within the Rebound therapy experience as of now.
Mhm.
What we do have is that we use the technology of the Rebound app to support that self-paced, self-guided healing. That is not the same thing as treatment. It's not a replacement for treatment. It is a space and a path for people to explore their reactions to trauma and start putting to words some things that might be helpful for them in their journey. We've also got some access to like grounding tools if people are interested in doing some grounding work to help calm their nervous system. We've got a few audio recordings to support that are trauma informed and developed specifically based on feedback from the members in our actual community. But then when we're talking about the therapy, we're not developing like an AI therapist. We're not using an app to replace therapy. We're actually connecting people with real trained therapists and these are not these it's not like a therapy marketplace. We're not like sort of routing people to random therapists. Our therapists are all full-time rebound therapists. They're trained in-house, they're supervised in-house, they are given ongoing consultation. And so when you're getting therapy through Rebound, you're getting a very consistent, high quality, highly specialized experience. These clinicians have been through hours and hours of training and supervision, um, and we keep really rigorous standards around what we expect therapy to look like to support our members the best that we can. So the therapy is conducted virtually through a teletherapy platform. But you're working with a real human who's been trained in prolonged exposure to support your healing.
Yeah, that's amazing that you guys were able to create such a platform. And so I'm very curious about what the next chapter looks like. What is exciting to you about the future of trauma recovery and the tools that are being built, including for rebound therapy, especially when it comes to expanding access while staying grounded in science and evidence-based research?
So we're starting our therapy offerings with prolonged exposure. And again, the goal really is to help people get their brains and bodies out of survival mode so that they can sort of make space for something new in their life and start, building towards a life that they want, not being held back by these symptoms. But we know that, recovery from trauma is complex. There are a lot of layers. Healing is not usually one straight line. Everyone has unique needs. So, what I would say I'm most excited about at Rebound, at least, is thinking through, as we start to expand, thinking through what are the additional offerings that we're going to start putting together to support our members sort of beyond PE. So that's really exciting. I think another thing that I'm really excited about that our organic communities really feed into, but I see this happening in other spaces too, not just with Rebound, but I think socially people are really hungry for the ability to talk about these experiences more openly. I think when survivors stay quiet, like the people who benefit from silence are certainly not the survivors. The perpetrators, yes, in the instances where there is a perpetrator. But I'm really also incredibly passionate about the idea of maybe decreasing the stigma around talking about things that we've been through. I think if it were more normalized to share the experience of trauma in communities and safe relationships, again, I think that would do wonders for healing. I think healing often occurs in therapy, but it should never only occur in therapy. And so I think the more we're able to create some new norms around the things that are okay to talk about and not talk about, I think um, I would be really excited to see additional movement there.
Yeah. And before we wrap this up, we have one question from our audience. So, I believe you said in the beginning the CEO had experience where she was trying to find different therapists. So we had a question of someone, they tried different therapists, different apps, and they still didn't find anyone to help them or they can connect to. Could you speak on how Rebound is able to help with that?
I mean, well, our hope is if somebody, our goal and our mission is if somebody comes to Rebound, they will not have that experience because we are training our providers, everyone who has contact with a survivor coming through Rebound. It is our like steadfast mission that they will have an experience that is what it should be like everywhere when people are seeking help. um, you know, no treatment is 100% effective. 83% of people who go through PE will get full remission from their trauma symptoms. But I also think it's going to be important for us to, be really collaborative. And if people aren't improving, to be really thoughtful about, how we can best support them. But again, if somebody's looking for that front door, it is our mission that our front door is welcoming to everybody who comes to us.
So this conversation really highlights something important. Trauma doesn't just have to heal on its own just because time passes. But healing is possible when people have access to the right tools, support, and understanding. Dr. Berenz, before we close, what's one message you want to carry, want someone carrying unresolved trauma to hear today?
I would just say that there is no like one path or one pace to your healing. We're all unique. And to give yourself some grace with the pace that you're at today, and the place that you're at today. I think we can be patient with ourselves while also moving towards healing. But if you're struggling in your healing, that is not a fault of yours, and that is not a deficit of yours, and that you are in good company. You are not alone in that.
Awesome. Um, where could people connect with you or download the Rebound app if they're interested?
Yeah, right now the Rebound app is available in the Apple App Store. So if you search Rebound in the App Store, you can find it. We've also got a web page where anyone, regardless of their device, can learn more about and sign up for therapy. So that's hellorebound.com. And people are welcome to, reach out to me at Erin@hellorebound.com if they have any specific questions or want to connect. Yeah, we always love hearing from people.
That's great. We'll be sure to include the links that you just referred to in our show notes. And for those who have listened, if today's conversation resonated with you, please make sure to like this episode, subscribe to the Dash Wellness podcast. It helps us keep bringing on experts like Dr. Berenz and making mental health conversations more accessible and common on this platform. We would love to hear from you. Please drop a comment. Let us know what mental health topics you want us to bring into the Dash Wellness podcast and specific experts. Your feedback greatly helps us shape future episodes.
All right. Thank you for joining, coming on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been really great.